Hello, everyone. My name's Stephen Gronell from Energy Medicine and Interex Pain Clinic. My brain's a bit fried today. We've had a very busy day in the clinic. Seen a lot of people. Had more questions, which is wonderful. So, what I want to start with tonight is looking at plantar fasciitis and some of the other aspects that people ask about, want to know about. We've really focused on two key areas, standing and walking, over the last couple of weeks. So first thing, this quick little recap. Standing, obviously, key things, having your feet nice and square. Obviously, then within that, when you stand, it's to offset your feet, put your foot that's hurting, toes down first, stand up with more of the weight on your non-affected foot. So that takes some of that initial load off. And we've talked a little bit about initial movements and stuff, and I've sent quite a lot of links out for that. Second area with walking, a little bit more complex. So we're looking very much at my famous foot, heel down, weight transfer, and then push off. And we've had a few little movements. We're looking at three phases and three different systems with walking forwards and walking backwards, and then looking at this idea of 3, 6, and 9. Now, one of the key things that I've had questions about is if you can do 3 minutes, have a go at doing 6. If you can do 6, have a go at doing 9. Once you're up to 9 minutes, have a look at doing 9 minutes more than once in a day. And if you can do two lots of 9 minutes in a day, have a little go at doing 18 minutes. So it's all about magnitude. And one of the key things with the muscles of your feet and all these muscles here, not your calf muscle, but your foot muscles, is that they're all what they call slow twitch. So they're all based on endurance. So the idea is that they can withstand lots and lots of repetition on movements. Obviously, you can walk long distances, take lots of steps, but also they're used to doing lots of corrective movement with balance and agility. So they need lots of exercise to stimulate them, to get them to build up and work. We'll cover that a little bit more in a minute. So one of the questions I've been asked over the last couple of weeks is something about night socks. Now, what night socks are, they're essentially a splint. And the idea is that most people's feet, when they are in bed and they're asleep, tends to point forwards. So you tend to relax your ankles and your foot tends to drop down. And obviously that causes issues because we've talked about before, obviously as the fascia heals and the tissue heals, that has an impact when you stand up and you bring back to this 90 degrees. Now, what a night sock is that it's a device that forces your foot to be at 90 degrees or close to while you're asleep. Now, the concept of that sounds really, really good. The trouble that I have with it is that sleep's really important. So if you crank it up and you have the full 90 degrees, it can be quite aggressive. So it can be quite stressful and really uncomfortable, which stops you sleeping, which obviously defeats the object. I would recommend if anyone's going to have a go with these is to trial them in the evening and use them if you're chilling out on the sofa or you're reading a book, watching TV, chatting. It's to have it in a more relaxed phase and actually force it to gradually push up as opposed to going straight for 90 degrees, to do it progressively. I wouldn't recommend sleeping with them. Some of my clients have, and they've been okay, but they're foot, as in tilting forward, isn't as extreme. They've still got quite a lot of ankle mobility. Now, one of the things that I highlighted in the last session was foot rockers. I would probably say that using a foot rocker is more effective and easier and more comfortable, particularly if you then increase the repetitions of how often you use it. Most things that I say are usually a minimum only. So if you're saying doing something once a day, say a 6-minute walk or a 9-minute walk, if you're doing that once a day, that's really a minimum. If you can do it more, obviously that's better. And I'll explain a little bit about how that works with habits and stuff like that. So night sock can be good. I do it progressively, but it can be also quite painful. Another question I get asked a lot, particularly because of the marketing, it's quite aggressive. I have actually bought one and I am trialing it with some of my clients. It's called a Fitbit, which is a roller which vibrates. And the idea is that it will relax all of the muscles and the tissue in your foot. And obviously then use it and put pressure and stuff on. But obviously then within that, that's quite good. We've talked a little bit about obviously some of the movements. But obviously, you get the same effect for relaxing the muscles by doing the walking exercise that I highlighted in the last session. So as you walk forwards and you've got your heels down short strides, as you step back, what you're doing is you're stretching all of the muscles of your feet, but they're not loaded, they're working opposite. So they're working what's called eccentrically. So they're actually lengthening under load. So we're functionally getting your feet to relax as opposed to using a device. But because it had a lot of positive feedback for different applications, I really wanted to trial it because I like trialing stuff. So I've got a few clients that are actually using them as a trial, and we're trying to do it in measured time, a little bit like I did with foot rockers. So if it's good, I'll promote it and it's good and all the other bits. If it's not so good, I'll explain why and how that little works. Now, the other thing that people link in with that is looking very much at the massage balls. So you can use massage balls, rollers. There's quite a lot of different applications. You can get like a scalp thing which actually works and massages the feet. And obviously, you can have foot massage and elements like that. All of that works on the soft tissue. All of it works on the muscles. It can help with some of the nerves. It can help with some of the fascia alignment. So it's not that it doesn't work. It just tends to be temporary. And obviously, then within that, unless somebody else is manipulating your feet, you can only put so much pressure on. So I would say that it's positive and it's nice and it's relaxing, but it's not necessarily going to be a long-term fix. It's quite short. As I said, the jury's still out on the Fitbit. I'm trialing it. Early indications are it's a little bit temporary, but some people are benefiting and finding it quite useful. And I think also it helps a little bit with circulation. So I've got a couple of people who've got gout as well. So we'll see. We'll see how that works. Now, one of the big things that I get asked pretty much by every single person, because I ask them to bring in, when I do assessments with people, I do things in bare feet because that's my thing. And obviously, it's the best reference point that I have. But I get asked every single time, anybody with any foot or ankle problem, what sort of shoes? And it'd be lovely to have a product that I've made myself and I could endorse and say this is the best thing since sliced bread. I think there's a very much application, so it's what you're using it for. So I'll start with one that's useful in the sense because it puts everything into context. So one of the things that I do, not enough at the minute, but it's what I do, is go out walking. So I use a walking boot. So this is quite a heavyweight boot. It's obviously got good ankle support, good sole, all of that, and it's quite rugged. What you'll notice from the sole, which is exactly practicing what I preach, is that the thickness here is almost the same as the thickness here. So actually, as a walking shoe, it's very, very flat. It's not raised. So there's cushioning there, but it's quite heavyweight cushioning. So the support is quite strong. So these boots are designed for quite heavyweight off-road sort of walking, lots of rocks, scrambling, that type of thing. So they're quite a heavyweight boot. Now, the key thing that I say to everybody with boots is if you're going uphill or downhill, you need the ankle sort of support quite tight. So if you're doing prolonged up and downhill, yeah, quite tight, lots of support. That's what you want it for. If it's very undulating ground, again, you want quite tight ankle support. If you're on flat ground, so I live in Stratford, we've got a lovely greenway. So if I walk down the greenway because the weather's bad in these, I have the ankle elements very, very loose so that I have a good lot of ankle movement because obviously I want ankle movement because that will take pressure off the fascia. If I don't have ankle movement, you're going to walk slightly differently, and that's fine if the terrain is what that is. So walking boots are designed for undulating terrain, so walking across fields, all of this type of stuff. Obviously, slippy environments, everything else. Wellingtons are designed, I would say, more for standing or short distance because they offer no real support, even expensive ones. And obviously, they're custom molded, so you can't adapt them. I obviously like stuff with laces. Now, boots are the easy thing to talk about because everyone can rationalize that. I use them for a specific purpose. The other thing that I've had a big rant about, and I will send you a link on, is these flip flops. Now, that's the other extreme. So, obviously, the idea is they're very flat, which is good. But obviously, then with the way that you actually put your feet into them and hold them, you have to grip the flip flop. So, in gripping the flip flop, you're making your muscles work like that. So all your muscles are nice and flat, and the idea is they work so that you can push your foot off. If you're then using them in this position, you can't then bend your toes to push off. So what happens is you swing. So you swing from your hips and don't use your knees or your ankles, and you use your feet to grip onto the flip flop. What that does then is put a lot of pressure on the fascia. So these very short distances, beach wear only, not around the house or anything else, you're much better off being in bare feet. But again, lots of people wear them, lots of questions about them, and it doesn't matter how much they cost. So if you've spent £100 on some really fancy ones, and I've seen some really nice ones over the last few weeks, it is very much a standing sort of thing only, even if they've got lots of support and everything else. Now, number one thing that people have, there's loads of different brands out there. Lots of people I see buy Skechers in different forms, either slip-on versions or like the trainer versions. Um, they're okay. And the key thing to remember is how thick the heel is relative to the front. The flatter that can be, like on the boots I showed you, the better it is, because the idea is that you're at 90 degrees. So from a foot point of view, the loading and everything is in the right place from the foot muscles and all the other bits. Now, lots of trainers are like these. So you've got really thick heels relative to the front. So the idea is that as you run, and we'll cover running in a bit, you land on your heel so that it takes all of the impact out while you're running on hard surfaces, roads, pavements, that type of thing, path. And the idea being is that as you're running and you're taking a long stride, you're transferring a lot of your body weight. Up to 3 times your body weight goes through your foot. So the reason for the shoe is to give your foot support so that you don't slip because of the surface. And also as you land, it creates a lot more shock absorption. So it takes some of that initial impact out. We'll talk about running a little bit later in the presentation specifically. But the key thing is that if you walk in running shoes, you'll see that your body obviously tilts everything slightly forwards. So they can again be comfortable for plantar fasciitis, but only really with standing. As soon as you start walking, you have to work your ankle a lot more to be able to get this big heel to engage first. Otherwise, you end up walking more on your toes. So it promotes more toe walking. So when you're out and about and you see different people running, you'll see that a lot of people will run quite short strides, but they'll be landing on their toes. So now I've told you that, you'll have a little look and go, they do. Now, if we move then on to some of the other areas, because I'm trying to cover lots of stuff tonight, hot and cold treatment. Again, I get asked a lot of questions. I have a lot of calls, a lot of interaction with different people. And it's very much looking at, right, I've done hot treatment, I've done cold treatment. And this is something that's quite heavily recommended by podiatrists, physiotherapists. If you look on NHS Direct, again, hot and cold treatment to help with this is a factor. Now, part of the benefit of hot and cold links into inflammation. So what I'm going to explain is a little bit how it works. And it's very different for feet compared to other parts of your body. And the reason that is that your feet are used as a big temperature regulator from when you're a child. So when you're a child, your feet indicate your temperature of your body. So your body sends blood to the feet, it's furthest away from the heart. And the idea being is that it's cooler so that obviously you can cool your body. So if you're hot, say you've had a lot of hot food or it's a warm day, what you want to do is keep your feet cool. And obviously your body sends blood and it cools the blood and it helps cool your body. So it keeps homeostasis or regulated temperature. Now, as you get older, you then develop sweat glands. So you sweat. I've got a bit of sweat on my head, obviously under your arms and the various groin areas, back, chest, etc., etc. So your body then sweats all over. So it does that to cool down. Now, with your feet, when your feet swell up, it means that you've got too much fluid there and it's not going back enough. Now, that can be because of movement. So obviously, when you walk and you bend your foot like this and it goes up and down, what that does is contract the muscles of the back part of your leg, and that helps push fluid and blood back up to your heart and back up to the sort of main area of your body. So obviously that's great, but we do a lot sitting around because of work. Now we're a lot more seated. I do a lot of sitting around, and obviously we do a lot of relaxation and stuff at weekends and in the evening. So we spend quite a lot of our day sat down. Even if we've got a job where we stand up all day, that's only a third of the day. A third you're asleep, and a third you invariably are going to be in a rest phase. So that involves a lot of sitting because that's the way that we've evolved as a population. So what happens with your feet is you get pooling. Now, even if you don't have any circulation issues, so you have no blood pressure issues, no circulation in the sense of veins or arteries or any of those sort of contraindicators, everybody can get feet to swell. Now, obviously, when it's hot, people's feet swell more because you have more blood there trying to cool your body down, so it's trying to regulate your temperature. And when you've got plantar fasciitis, your body goes through pain. Obviously, it's painful, and inflammation, and then ideally healing. So you go through that as a tissue recovery. So how hot and cold treatment works is that it's forcing your body to either bring more fluid to the area, so to get more cells and more circulation to the area, or to take toxins or cells that are worn out away. So it works best in combination, because people say which is better, hot or cold. I would always say as a combination. So if your feet are hot, what it promotes is your body to get rid of inflammation. So if you put your feet in warm water or quite hot water, what that does is it means that your feet become too hot. So the blood in that area needs to move away from the heat because it's rising in temperature. What that does then is it forces the heart rate and the blood pressure to increase, which forces blood that's cooler at different parts of your body to come down to your feet and to that hot blood to move away. So we're looking at keeping a balance. So what that does is it gets rid of toxins. Now, if because of your feet you get pooling, so the blood tends to stay there a little bit more, particularly if you do a lot of sitting, this putting hot heat there, so hot water, hot pads, the hot elements, those sort of breakable hot pads that you can get, or the electric ones where you put your feet in and the warm elements. All of that will help because it will force more blood and more fluid to that area. So it will actually help your body with more cells and help with healing. Okay, that's a good thing. We want that. The second phase, because that's the heat and it's pulling stuff away. If you then do cold, so you ice it, and one of the treatments is to use like a frozen water bottle like this, but frozen, and you roll your foot on it. So the idea being is that you're looking at cooling it down. So that again forces more blood, so it helps with your circulation. So what you're doing is you're putting either more blood there or trying to take more blood away using hot and cold. So for hot, you're trying to get more blood away because it's getting too hot, so it's moving away from your feet. If it's cold, obviously your body's then sending more blood there, which is hotter, which is obviously then going to help with inflammation. So it's working two ways. So you're either pulling cells away that are worn out and they've done all their job, or you're stimulating the body to bring other cells there. So hot and cold works in that way. So if you're going to do hot and cold, I would recommend 10 minutes of heat, 10 minutes of cold, and see how that works. Now, I would say that to help with plantar fasciitis, it's more limited. But if you've got feet that are really sore, it works really quite well because actually it helps with circulation. And if you've been on your feet all day and you're struggling a little bit, actually by having your feet maneuver around and having that relaxation element actually does help. So hot or cold works in that situation. But if you want to get it to help with inflammation, if your feet are swollen, some hot and some cold forces the body then to obviously change because you've got this homeostasis. So we're trying to stay at 37 degrees or thereabouts. And if it's too hot, then obviously it clinks and goes the other way. If it's too cold, it reverses the process. So the idea is that you're playing with your body on a temperature level. Now, if you think about that, your feet are the furthest away from your heart. So any circulation there gets reduced when you sit down. I mentioned that when you sit down in the first sort of series, 80% of your nerve communication shuts down. So obviously your interaction shuts down. If you then stand up, obviously everything re-engages. So movement is more important than say rest or hot and cold because you're going to rest when you're asleep. But hot and cold can have some effect, particularly on inflammation. And remember that your body goes through pain, inflammation, then healing. Now, the problem that most people have with plantar fasciitis, it tends to be over a 24-hour period, is that they get caught in this pain inflammation loop. So it just basically keeps spinning around and around and around, and you don't actually get out of that loop. So it's about changing something, which is what I've been talking about, standing and walking. So you've done some activity. Some people have communicated back to me they've had a go at doing some of the standing movements and gone, yeah, that's helped. It's not as painful. It's not as painful first thing in the morning. If it's not as painful, it can go through an inflammation and then a healing phase. So you're not aggravating it as much. If you're then walking and it's slightly different, so you have altered how you walk, so you've altered your foot position slightly further apart, you've done the various walking exercises, and then you've had a go at walking 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 9 minutes. All of this is helping heal your heel, so helping heal your plantar fasciitis. So all of it is stopping the aggravation, which is allowing the body to heal itself. Now, that's brilliant and that's great. And obviously, that starts that ball rolling. But as I stressed to you, all the muscles of your feet are endurance. So they're designed to be slow twitch, aerobic. So within that, they're used to doing massive distances. They can do 10, 20, 30,000 steps. So your feet might ache, but the rest of your body will ache more because your feet hurt, but actually my legs are hurting and everything if I've done, say, a 10 or 15-mile walk. And obviously, the muscles of your feet do lots and lots of corrections when that happens. So, a lot of stuff that you'll see on the internet all relates to this bit here, your Achilles tendon, and that comes around the back part of the heel and then inserts right where your fascia is here, which is why you get so many problems here, and which is why everyone talks about stretching that tendon. Now, that is one of the strongest tendons in the body, and it also allows the body to produce a lot of force through the foot. So, there's lots and lots of different exercises that you can do to strengthen your Achilles tendon. So you can do sort of structured movements on stairs, you can do jumping, you can do walking around on your toes. So you can do all of these elements, which will help stretch that, but also strengthen it. And I do quite a lot of stuff where I progress people where they use the foot rocker, where they're standing and they're in different positions to allow them to put more force through their Achilles tendon. But one of the key things that you need to bear in mind is it's how much movement you do. So you're better off doing more walking over a regular period of time. So do some walking every day, even if it's only 10 minutes where you focus and look at the technique. That's 70 minutes in a week. So the accumulation, little and often, is really, really key. And it's getting it into that habit. Now, lots of the stretches that you see are usually too aggressive. So lots of the stuff that's on YouTube and lots of the movements are good stretches for the Achilles tendon. They're good stretches for the feet. All of this stuff with walking with your toes backwards and forwards and everything else, really good for working the foot muscles, but actually they don't mimic walking. And obviously that's what you want to be able to do, or stand. So both of the extra movements don't really help with that. It's a little bit like going to the gym and say doing lots of weights and all these lifting of different things, and then go, right, I want to go out and run. Okay, your muscles are stronger, but your running technique's awful because you can hardly move and you've got no endurance or you've got no speed because you've got all these muscles and you've got a very different technique, and then they've been used in a different way. The other thing also is that all of your lower legs, so your calf muscles and your feet, if you think about 10,000 steps, everyone talks about 10,000 steps. We're going to rewind and look at 1,000. 1,000 steps is 1,000 movements. So if you look at any video, they'll talk about, right, you need to do 3 lots of 8, 3 lots of 12, 3 lots of 10, whatever. You're only looking at 30 or 40 repetitions. But if you think about walking, you're going to do thousands of steps. So if you're looking at multiplying you up, 1,000 steps is 1,000 movements. It's 500 on each foot. No one talks about that. Now, if you're doing 500 repetitions on the edge of a stair, your foot's going to be absolutely worn out, but it doesn't have that level of stress or load. Even if you haven't got any injury, you don't put that stress or load on unless you're running. And even then, mechanically, you don't put as much stress on. So a lot of the static movements aren't as beneficial as they first seem. Logically, you think, yeah, I can bend my ankle more, that will help. I can strengthen up my back part of my leg, my calf muscle, and I can strengthen it to do that. But functionally, you don't use it like that. So you've got to think, okay, walking is going to be the key thing to help build everything up. Some of the stretches are great, and I use different stretches to actually help people progress with things like stairs and maneuvering around. But all of the movements that I do are very functional based, not in sense in endurance or strength based or power based, because the limitation is that you do a lot more movements than that. So if you rehabilitate hands, if you think how much you use your fingers, I'm quite an animated talker, so I use my hands a lot. If you think about mouse movements, typing, playing the piano, you use your fingers loads. And then if you just think about dexterous movements that you do, so if you're doing rehab on hands, you need to think in the hundreds and thousands, not in the 3 lots of 10. So it's really important to think about that when you're looking at other information that's out there, because there's a lot of conflict. But it's looking at it and saying, okay, yeah, well, they want you to do 10,000 steps. So that's 5,000 steps per foot. Okay, so that's 5,000 movements. So your muscles are used very differently to do 5,000 movements compared to doing 3 lots of 10, because obviously the strength difference and the power difference is extreme. Now, to get fatigue, that's why they do these quite extreme movements. So you can really feel it working. It's quite intense. If you've got an injury, how do you regulate that? Your body weight and all the other factors. It's quite difficult to mimic and change that. So it's really important to look at a lot of these movements and think, okay, key thing I want to be able to do is stand and walk. Some of the other elements, it's doing other things will benefit me more. And it's about using a combination of forces to be able to improve. So it's been really, really specific. And it's looking also at making sure that your fascia is fixed. Now, I've mentioned a lot about repetition, 10,000 steps, 5,000 steps on a foot, all of these sort of elements. What we're looking at doing is building a different habit. So I've asked you to change your foot position. I've asked you to change how you walk, how you stand up, exercises that you can do in between. And it's about doing these on a regular basis. So it's developing a habit so that your body can heal itself, so that the fascia can heal, because you're taking pressure off it. Now, I've got a lovely little statistic which is brilliant, and it is mathematically correct. If you do 1% change every day, so you change 1% every day over 365 days, you'll end up being 37 times better at something. That sounds like that's not going to work, but the way the multiples work, over a year, you'll be 37 times better. The key thing to remember, if you do nothing, you'll be essentially 37 times worse, because the magnitude will just increase. Now, most people that I see, and most people that engage as far as, all right, I've got a problem, I've got plantar fasciitis, I've been to the doctors, I've tried various different strategies, is people that have had a problem and it's got progressively worse over a period of time. So in a sense, you've had to modify how you've looked. So it just doesn't suddenly go really, really painful really quickly unless it's an acute injury. It tends to be really slow and really progressive. So it progressively just gets more and more and more uncomfortable. So most people I see have had plantar fasciitis 3 to 6 months really is a minimum. I've had people that have had it for years. I speak to people that have had it for 5 years, 10 years, and they've had problems on and off for that time period. And they've tried all sorts of different things. So I literally rushed from the clinic to come and do this live. The person that I'd seen had had insoles for 11 years. It was like 11 years. And they'd had multiple appointments. So it wasn't that they'd had the same insoles, which should have been a nightmare, that actually had lots of custom made insoles for different shoes. And what was interesting was the shoes that they were wearing were quite worn out. So it wasn't even that they had the shoe as a feature. When I spoke to them, they'd had these done by a specialist, all the special gel and everything else, but they'd never looked at how they walked, how they stand, how they moved, all the shoes that they were going into, but they would make your insoles without any problems. And interestingly, the insoles, apart from being worn out, weren't that dissimilar, because the foot hadn't changed, because your foot's relatively consistent as a piece of tissue. your arms don't change or anything else. So there's a lot of consistency. So you're literally having the new of the same thing, but you've still got the same problem. And interestingly, that wasn't really addressed. So if you want to look at progressing, I talk different things to different people, but 20% of runners get plantar fasciitis, and running is quite a key element. Now, our bodies are, from a sort of energy point of view, are designed to do two things. We're designed, I know this doesn't sound odd because I say design, but we're designed to do walking long distances. So we can walk 10 to 20 miles. So from a conditioning point of view, our bodies, from an energy source and how our body processes fuel, we can walk 10 to 20 miles relatively easily. So the amount of conditioning and training you'd need to be able to do to walk 20 miles is relatively low. With practice, you'd be able to do that easily in 3 months. So that isn't necessarily a major factor. Walking, we can do, we can get up to a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles quite quickly. When you look at running, they talk about things like couch to 5K. To be able to do 5K, you're looking at 8 to 12 weeks, again, the same time period, but you're looking at 5 kilometers. Now, that's not running at world class pace. That's just been able to run for 5 kilometers. And invariably, you'd run quite slowly, around that 5 to 6 miles an hour. Now, you could walk 3 to 4 miles an hour and be able to get up to that pace. And to be able to cover 5K, it's about 3 miles in a few weeks, because our bodies are designed to do that type of activity. We're only designed, from a physiological point of view, to run for about 90 seconds max. And the idea is that we would, historically, when we were hunter-gatherers, you'd walk after said lion. I like using a lion because it's exciting. So you'd walk after the lion, you'd be sort of stalking it. You might walk 10, 15, 20 miles. Lion gets tired, you get tired. 90 seconds of combat. You win, brilliant. You bring home the lion, you've got food. If the lion's winning, you've got 90 seconds and you run off and you get away from the lion. So you've got that explosive type of movement. So 90 seconds is around sort of 400 to 600 meters, and you couldn't run max speed, but you could run fast. And obviously 100 meters is all out, buildings on fire and going as fast as I can. So you might be able to run 60 to 100 meters in that sort of timeline. That's what our bodies are designed to do. When you run really quickly, you run more on your toes. So it's all about pure speed and power. So when you watch athletes on the TV, they have special running spikes and they run, and predominantly it's midfoot and on their toes. And they shorten their stride slightly so that they can keep the speed, and they push really far backwards. When you see endurance runners on the TV, particularly on a track, up to 10,000 meters. Again, they run on their toes because it's all about speed. And they've spent roughly about 4 years as a top class athlete conditioning their body to be able to do that and practicing running so that they can do that running on their toes. But that's a really, really specific application. Most people go out running in a pair of these, and then they start running, they're running relatively slowly, they take short strides and land on their toes, which is why 20% of runners have plantar fasciitis, because of the way that they run. It's dead simple to fix. People hate me saying this. All you need to do is pick your knees up much higher and aim to land on the heel. If you land on the heel of your shoe, that's what it's designed for. You've got a lot of cushioning, shock absorption, airbags, all sorts of stuff in the heel. And then weight transfer, push off, heel, weight transfer, push off. And the way that you can accomplish that is to lift your knees up as high as you can each time you stride. And as you lift that knee up, as you put your foot down, make sure you put your foot down and land on your heel. That's a lot more physically demanding than jogging, because that's running. Jogging, running on your toes, you've got a 1 in 5 chance of getting plantar fasciitis. So the fix is dead easy. The shoes are designed specifically to help that. But most runners don't do that unless they can run reasonably quickly. So if you can run 7 to 8 miles an hour, you will run more and land on your heels more, because you take a longer stride because of all the mechanics. But as you progress to that speed, you go through running more on your toes, and then gradually you start to run more on your heels because you pick your knees up and take a longer stride. Your body's more conditioned. But the group of people that do that is very, very small. So I always advocate to everybody, you should run short distances, no more than 5 kilometers, should run less than that. But ideally, you should walk little and often, so regularly, as often as you can. And that will have more impact to help with your plantar fasciitis, your foot strength, and obviously then your fitness and health going forwards. So running, yeah, it's great, it's brilliant, it works for you. It's just something that we've designed because we want to be faster, higher, stronger. But actually running, our bodies are designed to walk long distances and only run short distances. And that's where the fundamental issue comes with how we actually work. So I've covered lots of different points and lots of different injuries. Key thing, we looked at standing, we've looked at walking, we've looked at lots of other things. Everything I've said to you, you need to think about in small segments and to do every day, 7 days a week. You don't need a rest because you're only doing small rehabilitation movements. The key thing to think about is little and often or win the day. Now, I say to people, I've got an online rehabilitation program. People usually see benefits after 3 weeks, and after 6 weeks, significant improvement. But it might be quite a lot longer till you're fully healed. And the reason for that is you might have spent 3 or 4 years getting the plantar fasciitis in the first place. When people come to see me in the clinic, I use different medical devices to help treat the fascia. So obviously that speeds up the process and also then reduces the pain and inflammation. So we can speed up the process through doing lots of rehabilitation movements. And I customize it to obviously the individual so I can make quite a lot of differences. The online program is a little bit more generic. It's easy to follow and it's a structured sort of process, but you can only obviously dip into that because of these are the standard problems that people have. If people come to see me with a specific issue, obviously I can tailor rehabilitation to suit them. So I do quite a lot of stuff online and I do quite a lot of stuff offline, so face to face. I'm based in Stratford. I've got very good reviews. I'm still running at around 93% as a success rate, which is pretty good. It will never be 100%. And obviously, the more people you see, it's going to drop down. Obviously, I know that because of the numbers, but things are modifying and changing. So we are being quite consistently good. I've also got good reviews and all the other pieces. There's lots of other experts out there, so I appreciate that I'm a little bit different. I tend to sort of be slightly different to the mainstream, and that's not done on purpose. That's just done on what I found works. And some stuff works, and I embrace it. Other stuff, I'm not so sure, but I do test stuff. So I'm testing a bit. I will do a live on how good that is and how to use it if it works in the way that I want it to work. So thanks very much for tuning in. Has anyone got any questions? No? Okay. I've got quite a lot of links that I'm going to send out after this. So I'm going to do like a replay as I've done before. And as I said, I've got quite a lot of links that I'll send out on things like footwear and some of the other elements that I've covered so that you can have more detail. I've got some other videos and then some other sort of blog stuff and that will help support what I've said. So thanks very much for signing in. It's been quite an intense month this month because while it's a holiday month, I've seemed to have done more this month than I've done the month before, but it's always a good thing. So thanks very much for tuning in, and I'm going to end there.